Colorado, don't look now, but using common sense precautions against COVID-19, stuff based on science, it might just be working. Speaking of don't look now, is anybody else worried about all the screen time our kids are getting with school and play now both involving just staring at screens? Denver is trying to use its streets for more than just cars, and it looks to be more than a passing fad. And the hunt for a waterfall, seen in an old photo, we're trying to do a favor for a guy who wants to take one more trip back to see it. That's next. I am starting to wonder if this is a problem. What we're both doing right now, staring at screens, especially just how much our kids are doing it these days. Now, I'm guilty, just like most other parents, of occasionally turning to a video babysitter in a pinch. But with the pandemic pushing more and more schoolwork online, the screen time that we have been warned to limit could increase exponentially. Our Anusha Roy explores that impact.
Let's be real, up until COVID, we weren't really thinking about how much time second graders spend on video conferencing platforms.
Here we are with a sample e-learning day for Douglas County elementary school students opting to learn from home, starting at 8:45 and ending at 3 with a recess and lunch break. The rest of the day is a combination of online and independent learning. Older students could have emotional check-ins and yoga classes worked into their schedule. But there's an important distinction here, according to clinical psychologist Jody
Exactly
Thomas.
that. We're talking about the fear of learning issues, reading, critical thinking, and attention. Now that's different when we're interacting with other humans in school than it is if we're just playing a video game or watching a show. And so the very platform itself has a likelihood of not being as dangerous, quote unquote, or concerning. Now, exactly what it's going to be like for them to be on Zoom or Google Hangouts for hours, honestly, we don't know. Because it is really new.
In Jefferson County, the district said students will have at least 3 hours of real-time remote learning. The day will include assignments and activities that don't always require being on a computer. And so far, around a quarter of families in that district are choosing the remote-only learning option.
Is this something you're hearing about from parents yourself?
All the time, yes. I feel guilty. They're on screens more than I ever would have guessed or wanted them to. And at the same time, like, what in the heck is this going to be like for my 7-year-old or 8-year-old? A lot of the rules that we've heard for years, an hour for kids under 6, and then really limiting for kids older than that, they're really great ideas, but they're probably not super realistic right now.
So another psychologist with Children's Hospital Colorado said it's really unlikely that parents are going to be able to scale back the screen time right now during a pandemic. So she said, take a little easy on yourself. Ease up on the guilt and the stress right now. There's enough going on. She actually tells families that when it comes to remote learning and video chatting with family and friends, she doesn't even count that as screen time. But it does, however, make it really important, right? We've been saying this all along. Get out, get some fresh air. Kyle, maybe even build in some no screen time just to give everybody's brains and their eyes a little bit of a break.
So, Anusha, this is not a statement about our 9 news meetings with our bosses, but I find that talking to people in Zoom meetings saps my will to live.
Yes, I mean, I am right there with you. And this is something Dr. Thomas is actually worried about for kids because as adults, right, Zoom and Google Hangouts, it's exhausting. We're not designed to just stare at each other via video screens all day long. So again, try to be intentional, especially as an adult, set that example and set the phone down, shut the laptop screen, and just do something else for a little bit. I think that's just good advice for everybody.
I absolutely think so. Anusha, it's good to see you. I go away for 3 weeks and you take away the mirror. My whole world is upside down. Thank you, Anusha.
Oh,
hey, Colorado's
I know.
case rate for new COVID-19 cases, it's dropping. Then you look at the fine print and you see that actually what's also happening is that the number of new tests is dropping as well. State processed about 7,600 in the last day. The weekly average per day is about 10,000. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on that, but let's not turn away good news. Colorado added 315 new cases since yesterday, lowers our 7-day moving average to 395 per day. We're seeing a continued decline from the last 2 weekly averages. Yay that. 184 people are currently hospitalized for COVID-19 in our state right now. Our weekly average for hospitalizations is below 200 now. 196 per day. Check that off as good news. Then you look at positivity. 2.6% of the tests came back positive for COVID-19 yesterday. That slightly lowers our 7-day moving average. Again, we want that rate as low as possible. It was up at 4.3% 2 weeks ago. Fort Collins police are now putting names and faces to the pro-police supporters arrested for supporting police by punching counter-protesters over the weekend. Michael Oropeza and Brian Woolley. Woolley's not the fuzzy one, that's Oropeza with the beard. Police say both came into Fort Collins where they do not live and were seen in Back the Blue supporters' very own videos celebrating the beatdown of Black Lives Matter counter-protesters. Woolley's got a record dating back to 1999 and an online trail of stuff like praise for the Confederate flag. Our quick search on Oropeza didn't turn up anything in Colorado. If you're looking for some good to come out of the pandemic, there is the fact that you can walk and bike down more and more streets without fear of your life these days. Drivers on more streets in Colorado are now being considered guests as opposed to kings. Marshall Zellinger looks at Denver's plan to make that pecking order a bit more permanent.
The more people that are riding bikes, the fewer people that are driving cars. The easiest sell for a driver to want bike infrastructure is getting people off of the road.
Jonathan Furtig is a cyclist first, something the city of Denver has on the top of its transportation pyramid with cars on the bottom.
Clearly, if you walk around this city or drive around this city, it's clear that that's not how the hierarchy has been for the past 60 years.
Just because a street has been used for cars since you lived here or since growing up doesn't mean it always has to be that way.
David Pulsifer is the city planner, responsible for planning a future with bikes and pedestrian as the priority.
I'm not trying to convince anyone to change their behavior.
He helped put together a 112-page document called Complete Streets to educate your behavior. It shows with pretty decent graphics how Denver streets may be designed in the future. Main streets like Tennyson, local streets like 35th, which already has a roundabout and other bike and pedestrian-friendly designs. Residential streets like Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and 14th Avenue downtown, where it's clear drivers aren't quite clear about what's their turf and what's a cyclist's.
How do you convince a driver this is a place that was mine and I'm not the guest, they're the guest?
You can give people visual and physical clues that like, oh, I can't fly down here. If it's it's the same thing that happens mentally to us on a narrow residential street when we see someone coming the opposite direction, like, oh, I'm gonna have to slow down here because there's parked cars on either side. No one says, oh, I see that car coming, I'm gonna gun it, You slow down and negotiate.
While Pulsifer says he's not out to convince anyone, our cycling enthusiast has a compelling argument.
There's a lot of people who are going to be losing access to cars in the coming months, and they're going to need a way to get around the city, and they're going to need to do it safely.
My favorite part of the 112 pages is what you and I would call a speed bump, Kyle. The document calls vertical deflection because, when you're reading through 112 pages, you see the word vertical deflection, you don't think anything of it. But if you saw a speed bump, you might be like, well, I don't like this idea. We don't just do this story just to show what the city might do. They're still looking for feedback over the next week and a half. You can go to the city's Department of Transportation and DOTI's website, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. I still want to call them Public Works, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, old habits die hard. I can't get over the vertical deflection thing. I'm just picturing one of us getting called in for our next performance review, and the boss is like, well, your career has hit a bit of a vertical deflection, Marshall.
I'm buzzwords and me do not get along. As soon as I saw that, I called him out on it, and David Pulsifer had fun with it. But he's like, we just like to make words that are more complicated than not sometimes.
I'm going to start using that all the time now. Bit of a vertical deflection. Thank you, Marshall. So months after protests turned into riots and damaged our state capitol, we are still just talking about a plan for the full cleanup and plans to fortify that Capitol building against the next round of rioting, whenever that may come. The Polis administration presented its plan to legislators this week. First, they're going to do windows and doors. Replacement glass started going in last week to replace the plywood covering the damage. The graffiti and protest slogans spray painted onto the Capitol, they're turning out to be tougher to remove than first thought.
We certainly appreciate everyone and can sympathize with their reaction to seeing the state capitol in the condition it was. We had many volunteers come and help clean up trash. That was certainly helpful. bring water sprayers to clean up, and they cleaned up the asphalt and concrete. That was helpful. But when they sprayed it on the building, it pushed the paint further into the concrete. We started cleaning graffiti the very next day after the riots and protests started. We've tried 3 different methods to clean the graffiti, including dry ice, lasers, and chemicals. Ultimately, we landed on chemicals, and that's a multi-day process.
There is also discussion of replacing the Capitol's heavy ornate doors. Apparently, they can't really be used to seal off the entrances in the way that they would like because there are glass doors and a security system installed right behind the big grand old doors. So each Wednesday here, we take $5 and we change the world for some of our neighbors in Colorado. We pool our dollars to help a nonprofit make its impact even greater. And you've raised more than $300,000 that way since June. All right, so let's talk about our group project for the week. The word of thanks that comes to mind when I think about newborns in need is beginnings. Life's beginnings have been on our minds this week as I talked about the birth of my second daughter. Every newborn in Colorado deserves that kind of happy and healthy beginning. Newborns in Need is a nonprofit effort that makes sure that every newborn leaving Denver Health, 9 out of 10 of them are going back to low-income homes, that they have what they need for a good beginning. So for every family, that means a basket with diapers and wipes and clothes, a book and a stuffed animal so that no child will start life without those things. And then for the families that need additional help, Newborns in Need is there for that, providing car seats, strollers, cribs if necessary. I just imagine a family worried about taking their newborn home from the hospital, knowing that they do not have a safe place to lay that baby down to sleep. No, we can help with this. If you're in for $5, as always, I will match the first 50 of those $5 donations to Newborns in Need. Same deal as always. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. Thanks to 303-871-1491. We send you the link to donate. It's super easy, and everybody does it together, and woo, the money piles up. The woman who runs Newborns in Need told me this week that they have always encountered families that are barely making it. And she said now, frankly, some of them aren't making it at all. There are enough of us gathered here tonight that we can make a significant difference for those families. Thank you for your help. A year ago today, DIA's renovation project hit a turning point. Now, it's about to hit the brakes on the original plans. And let's solve a Colorado mystery together.
So if anybody knows where that's at or can identify it based upon any of the memories of the photograph.
Calling Coloradans from every corner of this state. Can you help us identify this spot? Next. Perhaps we'll call them the before times. Back when we used to handshake and high-five, when we used to board a plane or a bus without a worry. Maybe we will think back on those days and wonder, what did we used to talk about? Well, a year ago today, we were talking about the struggle that was the renovation project at the airport. A year ago today, DIA terminated its contract with Great Hall Partners over some scheduling and budget issues. The struggle remains very real for the Great Hall renovation at the airport today. Hensel Phelps Construction is in charge now, but they are short on cash. The whole project is short on cash. The Post was the first to report that the project only has a quarter of the money needed for completion, a projected $170 million.
What we're really doing is we're being good stewards of managing this project to make sure it's done successfully. So that's a process. We're managing the risks. We're delivering the project to meet the schedule, the budget, make sure it's top quality, and also looking out really for worker safety on the project.
I will say, through pandemics and project problems, DIA has remained relentlessly PR positive about the entire thing. And you should know, it's only costing you money if you fly through DIA. That renovation is funded by airport fees and by bonds. A guy from Nebraska really wants to come to Colorado on a mission. We'll allow it, but he needs some directions first. Perhaps somebody out there can help. Philosopher Queens of TLC once wisely advised us, don't go chasing waterfalls. Tonight we present a counter-argument in favor of chasing waterfalls. One of them specifically, the one that's seen in an old photo. Chasing it down would mean a whole lot to a guy who loves our state, loved coming here as a kid, and needs to come back one more time.
Well, it's deafening. You know, it's so ridiculously powerful. You're just watching this absolute volume of water just start. My name is August Bach. I am trying to find this waterfall in Colorado that I went to as a little boy. I grew up in Omaha, so we vacationed in Colorado that year. But going to Colorado was a big adventure. I think we were there for 2 weeks. It was a good longest family vacation we ever took. And we got a Bronco, we got a camper, and we just set off into the mountains. You know, the most spectacular was definitely that waterfall. Going and finding that waterfall, because it was something that we sort of came upon. It wasn't on the itinerary. And my father was just really, really happy. He just seemed really, really happy. And it felt like we were on an adventure together. Well, I had my dad, I had his ashes. I have a small bullet of his ashes. I don't have the complete set, as it were. But I had it in my living room with a photograph of him. I'd been thinking earlier that, I could die today and no one would know what to do with that. It'd probably end up in a landfill. And that's just not right. I posted it on Facebook, and a bunch of people shared it. They just thought it was really interesting. And then a friend posted it to Twitter, and that's where you guys picked me up. So if anybody knows where that's at or can identify it based upon any of the memories or the photograph, that'd be great. I would like to take his ashes there and give him a nice ride for his life.
What do you think? It's kind of distinctive. The rock to the one side kind of looks like E.T., I thought. There are some theories floating around online, but if you think you are really certain about the location of this waterfall, we'll call people locally. Check it out. Email us your idea, next@9news.com, or you can always hit us up with the hashtag HeyNext on Twitter. We're out to change the world again, or at least our little corner of it. You and me together, and our $5. That and your feedback next. We disagree about all kinds of things, but I bet we can agree that every new child in Colorado should have the basics for a good start to life, you know? Diapers, clothes, crib, safe car seat, and that's why our Word of Thanks group project for the week is helping newborns in need. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. We'll send you the link to donate. Newborns in Need make sure that every growing family that leaves Denver Health leaves with what they need for a safe and healthy start to that kid's life. Many of these are low-income families. They make sure that they have the essentials. We're going to do what we always do. Take $5 from here, there, everywhere, pile them together, and raise tens of thousands of dollars overnight. We've heard from a couple of you that the website is overwhelmed. You may have to go back and be patient. That's a good thing. We've done this a couple of times for different nonprofits. Your generosity is always really appreciated. Gene asked us to keep the number up longer. We'll do that each week. Hey, a reminder, if you put the number in your phone, it does not change from week to week. We always use that same number, and we'll send you the different donate link for Word of Thanks each week. Can't tell you what it means that so many people are willing to chip in $5, and at the end of the week, we feel great that we did something together. See you next time.